All right, change is on the way. College sports are changing. We all know that. College sports already have changed, and they're going to continue to change. Really, over the next few months, we'll see some of the next big seismic changes. We've been talking about these seismic changes and awaiting these seismic changes and considering them, but it keeps getting closer and closer. And while we can have those sort of big picture, pull back the camera, 1,000-foot view, whatever cliche you want to use to talk about the overall state of college sports and what it's going to look like in the post-House settlement world, the reality for all of us, for me and for you and for probably anyone you really know in the Pitt fan world, is how it's going to affect Pitt. And more importantly, how Pitt's going to survive in that next step, in that next stage, that new world of college sports. Once we get into revenue sharing, what does it look like for Pitt? And I put up a big post on Panther-Lair.com yesterday, a pretty long thing, just kind of breaking down all the different angles I see in it and what Pitt needs to do and what they might do and what they should do. And I'm going to kind of take a little piece of that conversation and extrapolate it here and talk about just a couple of things that I brought up in that long post. If you want to read the whole thing and interact on that level, you should. Go to Panther-Lair.com to do it. Panther-Lair.com on the 247 Sports Network. But we're going to talk about a few of those things right here. And again, we flesh it out a lot more in the written version, but here on the podcast, we're going to talk about it as well. So I got 5 big questions that I think Pitt has to answer as they enter this next evolution of college sports. And the answers to these questions, and some of these things are going to be out of Pitt's control, but the answers of how they want to approach some of these things, how they want to answer some of these questions, this is going to determine what it looks like, what Pitt sports looks like, and Pitt athletics looks like in the new world of college sports. So it's a big topic. There's a lot to talk about, but I boiled it down to 5 questions that I think are the biggest questions facing Pitt and Athletic Director Alan Green. So let's dive into it here on the Wednesday edition of the Morning Pitt. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, we're double dipping a little bit here. Like I say, I wrote about this yesterday on Panther-Lair.com. Good discussion kind of coming out of it on the message boards. And I invite you to go check that out because it gets into some of these things a little bit deeper, on a deeper level, fleshes them out a little bit more. But I thought we could talk about it here as well. And we do this from time to time. I mean, there are topics that we write about, we talk about on the podcast, and then we talk about on the live show. We'll be live tonight at 8:30 with me and Jim Hammett. Hopefully you can tune in for the live Panther-Lair show this evening. We'll start on time this week. We didn't start on time last week, but we'll try and start on time this week right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We'll be going live at 8:30. If you want to make sure you don't miss any of our video content or like a live show, if you're worried you're going to miss the live show, here's what you need to do. Subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. The button is down over there. You can see it. And then turn on notifications. And that way, whenever we go live, you will get a notification that says, hey, Panther-Lair is live right now. And we were laughing. Jim is, of course, subscribed to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, has his notifications turned on. He wasn't sure what time we were going to start. It was my delay that was holding us up. But he said, he knew he had to get over to his computer because he got the notification from youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That's that kind of first-person testimonial from Jim there. And so it worked for Jim. If it's good enough for Jim, it's good enough for you. Like this video and subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, 5 questions that I think are the biggest questions facing Pitt entering this new world of college sports. And the biggest questions that Pitt has to answer to determine how they're going to function in this new world of college sports. Question 1. All right, to set the table in terms of just kind of baseline understanding so we're all on the same page, revenue sharing will start in July. Colleges can share 22% up to $20.5 million in revenue with the student athletes. They can decide how much. If they want to share all of that or part of it, they can decide how to use it, where it's going to go, what to do with it, all these different things. And it's going to change the way college sports looks. It's not going to necessarily eliminate some of the elements that have developed and emerged over the past few years, but it is going to change the whole structure of things. It really is. And there's a lot of decisions that Pitt and other universities are going to have to make, that Alan Green is going to have to make, that the coaches are going to have to make. And so question number 1 is sort of the most basic question right off the bat. Is Pitt going to commit to the full $20.5 million in revenue sharing. That's the max that you can share. You can share $20.5 million, that money that just goes straight cash from the school, from the university, the athletic department, to the student athletes. Is Pitt going to commit to that full amount? Because you don't need to. And I think there are going to be a decent number of schools that don't go full-blown $20.5 million in revenue sharing. Some of those schools are going to be in different conferences, though. I think in the, the Big East is an interesting test study. It's going to be interesting to see what some of those schools do. If they're able to generate that amount of revenue, and they might not, 22% might not work out to somewhere around to allow you to get up to $20.5 million, because some of it's going to depend on what your TV deal looks like. But different schools are going to commit different amounts of that 20.5. Some will go all the way up to the cap. Some will not use all of it. What is Pitt going to do? I think they will go all the way. I think they will commit to it, $20.5 million. I think if you want to be part of a Power 4 conference, if you want to be competitive in a Power 4 conference, this is the baseline of what you have to do, is be at that salary cap. You have to be giving the student athletes as much as you possibly can, and that means going all the way up to the 20.5. Now, question number 2 is, if Pitt does commit to going all the way, what impact does that have when you're trying to come up with that money? Assuming that you're not able to get all of it in donations. Because remember, we're talking about adding a $20.5 million line item expense to the budget that wasn't there last year. It wasn't there last year. And you're going to try and they're going to try and raise money. They've created the athletic directors fund that can, tax deductible donations that they're going to, I think, ultimately try to steer directly to this revenue sharing expenditure that they're going to have. But when it comes down to it, you're trying to spend $20.5 million that you didn't need to account for a year ago. And I think as well as I do, if you have a new $20.5 million expense, there's two things you can do. You can either there's more than two, but you can raise the money and get donors to give you $20.5 million in a year. You could go ask the university for it, but I don't know how much anybody's going to really stomach that in this current environment. Or you can, you do what you have to do, which every person has to do in their household with their household budget, is if you've got a new expense, that money's got to come from somewhere. And this is going to be one of the dark sides of this whole move to revenue sharing. It's a change that's widely celebrated, is empowering student athletes, giving them a piece of the pie, rewarding them for their contributions, allowing them to be stakeholders, if we want to use that kind of a term. But that's got to come from somewhere. And it's going to come from other athletic programs, and it's going to come from administrative staff positions. I don't know if they can fire enough people to come up with $20.5 million. I don't know if they can close enough programs to come up with $20.5 million. But that money has to come from somewhere. And they're not going to take it away from football. And they're not going to take it away from men's basketball. And they probably won't take it away from women's basketball. And I'm guessing they won't take it away from volleyball or the soccer programs, because those have been pretty successful. But there's still, how many? 19 team sports? Isn't that the number they always throw out? I just listed 6 or so that I think probably won't be touched. That leaves another 13 that, guess what? Making this 20.5, a decent chunk of it's going to come from your budget. And I think some athletic programs, some sports, team sports, are going to be relegated to club level status. I think administrative positions are going to be downsized and eliminated. I think there's going to be a thinning of the staff in the athletic department. And like this, I don't say any of this with cheer, this, it sucks, that's what it's going to come down to. But the money has to come from somewhere, and I don't really know if there are other options. It's got to come from somewhere, and unfortunately it's going to come from other sports and people whose positions are deemed to be unnecessary or redundant, or bloat, or whatever it might be. And, I know a lot of these people. I know a lot of the people who work in the athletic department. Relationships with a lot of people there. I mean, it's not going to be fun to see people go. But the money has to come from somewhere. Question 3. How is the rev share going to be split among the sports? The NCAA, the House settlement allows for schools to share up to $20.5 million, but after that, you have a fair amount of autonomy in deciding what you want to do. That's why there's this ongoing theory that the Big East might be in position to capitalize here because they don't have football really to worry about. Basketball is the big money maker in the Big East. And so they're going to be schools in the Big East and other basketball forward conferences. I mean, maybe the A-10, these conferences that you really only hear about once you get to the NCAA tournament every year, they're going to be able to dump more of their revenue sharing money into the basketball programs, more than probably what you're going to see from a lot of schools in the ACC. Where they're emphasizing football, or the SEC, or the Big 10, or the Pac, or not the Pac, but the Big 12, excuse me. Those schools those schools in those power conferences are going to give a decent amount to men's basketball, but they have to take care of football first. And I think that's what's going to happen at Pitt is, a vast majority, maybe between 50 and 75% is going to go to football. Well, if you're a school in the Big East, if you're Georgetown or you're St. John's or whatever, you might have a smaller overall amount that you're giving out, but you can give a bigger percentage to basketball. And it's going to be interesting to see how that shifts the balance of power in college basketball if these programs are able to build themselves into powerhouses because they've got more money to spend on the salary. It's going to be very interesting to see. Now, for Pitt, the rest of the ACC, the Big 12, the SEC, and the Big 10, the money's going to go to football. Most of it. Most of it is going to go to football. Some of it's going to go to men's basketball. If you're not in those two, you'll get something, but it's not going to be any close. And football, it's not just about giving a ton to football. Football has 100 guys, right? And even if you're only going to give football, money to 50 of them, that's more than you've got at any of the other programs. So, part of it is just a numbers game there. Those players might not all be making more than the women's basketball players or the volleyball players, but there are more of them to take care of. You need football to be the most competitive and successful program in your school, in your athletic department, if you're one of these Power 4 conference schools. And so that means you need to dedicate the resources. And that means, in this case, a significant percentage of the rev share. But that's one of the decisions that Alan Green is going to have to make. Now, I'm sure every coach is going to walk into his office and say, we need this much. And he's got to decide, and probably with a collection of other thinkers in the athletic department, have to decide what that split is going to look like. But, I think we all know football is going to get, football is going to get the vast majority. All right, question number 4. And this is something we talked about last week. We got into this question of a GM. My question was, does each sport hire a GM to handle the personnel budget within those sports? And I talked about this a lot last week, and it actually led to some interesting places in terms of conversation because the GM thing was on my mind a lot last week. I talked about it here on the Morning Pitt, and then I went in and asked Pat Narduzzi about it. I said, are you going to hire a GM as you get closer to July? He said, we already have a GM. It's Doug Whaley. I said, I thought to myself, my understanding has always been that Doug Whaley, the former Buffalo Bills GM, works for Alliance 412, the collective, a third-party group that's outside the structure of the university. So I said, does he work for you, though, or does he work for a third party? Oh, yeah, he works for Pitt. This is what Narduzzi said. He works for Pitt. 4 words that very clearly came out of Pat Narduzzi's mouth that were very clearly then corrected in a subsequent clarification from the athletic department. That Doug Whaley does not work for Pitt. Doug Whaley works for Alliance 412. He works with Pitt. He works in Pitt's interests, but he does not work for Pitt. And a question that I think Pitt and all these schools are going to have to answer, and a lot of them have already answered it in the affirmative, the question is, do you need to have a GM in-house? Someone with an office in the building who works for the school, works for the athletic department, gets a paycheck from Pitt, and is tasked with handling the personnel side, particularly the budget, and how you approach using this money. And I don't know what Pitt's going to do here. I think there's a lot of angles to it. I think there's in some ways it's beneficial to keep Doug Whaley working with Alliance 412. And not in-house. I think and this is actually leads into question number 5 in a second, but I think there's still going to be a lot of collaboration and collective work, pardon the pun, pardon the phrase, but I think there's going to be a lot of collaboration between Alliance 412 and Pitt's revenue sharing. I think, that's a right hand and left hand that each needs to know what the other is doing. And so having Doug Whaley, working for officially Alliance 412, but working closely with the university athletic department, it's beneficial. But I think it's also good to have him in-house, on staff, in the meetings every day. A guy like Doug Whaley is doing a lot of different things, though. I mean, you see him all over TV and radio and all these. He's a busy guy. I shouldn't say he's a busy guy. I have no idea how he accounts for his time, but he's got a lot going on. And so locking in and having an office in the football building and being just that, the GM of the football program, may or may not be in his interests. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. I think basketball is already moving toward that, of having a GM. I think, you've seen Dan Fisher move some pieces around on his staff this offseason. I wouldn't be surprised if he's angling to get a GM in place to work the personnel budget side of things. Football is the one that's interesting to me, though, because they've got a unique situation where their GM doesn't actually work for the program. He's off-site. And it doesn't mean it can't work that way. It's just a question of whether they will continue to do it that way. And then question number 5, and this is sort of tied a little bit again, is how does Pitt build the athletic department donor base while also supporting and endorsing donations to Alliance 412? Because here's the thing. Revenue sharing is coming. Revenue sharing is going to go. And everybody's going to get money from the schools, and how the schools use that money is going to be a big part of how they get transfers and things like that. But the outside third-party NIL deals, there are NIL deals that will be done through Pitt, and it'll actually count as part of that rev share money. But the outside NIL deals are still going to exist, and they're still going to operate beyond the scope of what the university touches and addresses and claims on its tax forms. Those things are going to still happen, the NIL deals. And that's where collectives like Alliance 412, I think, are still going to be really relevant. But the conflict, and this has been something of a conflict for Pitt and probably a lot of schools ever since NIL became a thing, but it is, I think it's going to become more so here in the next few months, is, like I said, as the athletic department tries to raise money to pay this rev share, right? Tries to get donations through the athletic director's fund, tax deductible donations, trying to get people to donate to help cover this money. Every dollar that goes to that is a dollar that's not going to Alliance 412 and NIL deals. And so everybody's going to have access to this rev share pool. All the schools will have the ability to do rev share if they are so inclined. What could end up happening then is that results in more or less a level playing field, meaning that NIL, the outside deals, the third-party NIL deals will still be something of a differentiator when it comes to trying to land transfers. Right now it's a differentiator, and I think it could continue to be, which means you're still going to need money to flow to the collective. Money's still going to have to go to Alliance 412. Money's still going to have to be used for NIL deals. If you're Alan Green, if you're the Pitt Athletic Department, how do you balance your need for money with the need for the money also to go there? Because every dollar that comes to you is a dollar that doesn't go to them. And the dollars to both are really important. And that's a question that I don't think Pitt ever came up with a good answer, but I don't know how interested Heather Lyke was in answering it a few years ago. It's a question that Pitt has to solve. And I'd love to ask Alan Green that question of how you balance that, how you endorse and support the work of Alliance 412 while also trying to get yours. It's a lot of questions. Those are the 5 questions that I think are the biggest questions. There's a lot of questions that are out there, though. And it's going to be fascinating to watch. It's going to maybe like a train wreck, maybe like a car race. Either way, it's going to be fascinating to watch, and I can't wait to see what happens. We'll continue talking about it for sure. We'll talk about it tonight on the live show, 8:30 p.m. right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Make sure you tune in for that. We'd love to have you join the conversation with me and Jim. 8:30 p.m. right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you don't miss any of our Pitt video content, and check out the site Panther-Lair.com so you get all the Pitt coverage you can possibly handle. Final practice of spring camp is tomorrow. We'll have coverage from that in the South Side, and then the Lou Gold game on Saturday. Oh, also they have the draft today, so we'll be covering that at Panther-Lair.com. Keep it posted. We will keep you posted right there, Panther-Lair.com. All right, thanks so much for tuning in today. Hope you've had a great week so far. Enjoy Wednesday. We'll see you tonight for the live show, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow morning for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.